relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. And kind of like just zoning in on some points of time that I think are important and reflect events that may be coming in the future. So the U.S. and Britain, they have a lot. Their histories are very intertwined, but the special relationship didn't really come about till World War II, and they may have collaborated in World War I, but World War II is definitely where it kind of came into its own because of the so many years they had to spend as strategic partners. And then after that, the rising threat of communism led to the Cold War, and they were allies in that. The UK offered assistance in both Korea and Vietnam. And then the 1980s were, in my opinion, kind of the premier year or decade for the special relationship. A lot was accomplished. They were able to greatly impact the downfall of their old foe in the USSR that they had been in the Cold War with for so many years. But it didn't start out as strong as it ended. Jimmy Carter was far less aggressive in his foreign policy and cared far more about his humanitarian exploits than the interests of the American people. One example of this can be seen during the Iranian hostage crisis. He was far more occupied with the issues in liberating Rhodesia and making it into Zimbabwe. Another area in which he actually came into conflict with the UK is he was trying to do a similar thing by installing a one person, one vote kind of democratically elected government in South Africa. And he was doing this by putting economic pressure on them, but the British kind of counteracted this by actually seeking to engage economically with South Africa, mainly because they had really good geographical position and a strong ally in Israel. When Reagan was elected, him and Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister in the UK, they were able to accomplish a lot, and this was mainly because they shared similar ideologies. Like, for instance, both of them, Reagan really wanted to bolster the US economy, and Margaret Thatcher sat to reinvigorate the UK economy, mainly through the reprivatization of many industries. And then they were also both very united against the threat of the USSR. So when the two leaders of either nation are on the same page, the special relationship is able to kind of work double time and succeed in a variety of ways. The shared kind of focus of the two nations, they were able to put a lot of economic pressure on the USSR at the time, which was instrumental in its downfall. One way they did this was they put a lot of funding into the Mujahideen, which were the freedom fighters in Afghanistan that were engaged in a war with the USSR at the time. So they definitely made that war a lot harder for the USSR. And then a lot of times when the special relationship is succeeding a lot, the two nations kind of put the interests of the opposite nation ahead of their own. An example of this is in the Falklands War, the U.S. actually repositioned satellites that were observing the USSR in order to get intel for the UK. So, yes. Yeah. And then the Gulf War came around, and this was kind of showed a lot of the combined influence of the two countries, how strong they can be, because they were able to amass a coalition that was able to cause the retreat of a 300,000 standing army, one of the, I'm pretty sure it was the fourth largest standing army at the time in a foreign nation. So they were very effective militarily, due to their combined strength and influence. And they were able to do that within only 4 days, which is very impressive. In the War on Terror, this period of time is a little dicey because it definitely shows the solidarity that the two have together. Like, immediately following the attacks, Blair was in Congress with Bush, showing his full support, and the British definitely showed out in support of the U.S. when they moved into Afghanistan with their largest single deployment since World War II. And then NATO, they were quickly able to dispatch the Taliban, but conflict in the area lasted for many, many more years. And the hunt for those responsible for 9/11 and Al-Qaeda definitely took a lot of time, and Osama bin Laden was not even killed till nearly a decade later. But this kind of event just shows like how the relationship, it's so strong that kind of always in each country's time of crisis, they're always there. But this could also be a double-edged sword, because when we delved back into Iraq under suspicions that they had weapons of mass destruction, the UK came with us, and that ended up being kind of a controversial conflict because there were not actually weapons of mass destruction. And that left kind of a sour taste in many UK citizens' mouths that they were just kind of sick of the moving in tandem, always doing everything for each other. So in recent years, the special relationship has not been as strong, and it's important that it gets back to its previous kind of status of strength that it had throughout the 80s and some of the 90s with these rising threats. The People's Republic of China has grown as an economic competitor to the West, and they're certainly not the biggest fans of the West at all. So then Russia is also an Eastern kind of enemy. Vladimir Putin has said that NATO is the greatest threat to Russian prosperity, and they've kind of been on a campaign to reclaim all their old territories, like Ukraine, the war they're engaged in right now. And actually, the more that war goes on, the more Russia could become desperate to actually seek out the People's Republic of China's aid, which could form a kind of opposite tandem that would be quite difficult to deal with. And in recent news, this man named Vladimir Kara-Murza was sentenced to 25 years for treason against Russia because he was speaking out against the Ukraine war. And the thing that is actually interesting about that is he's a dual British citizen, and his wife has been quite vocal about her frustrations with the British and their action following his incarceration, and probably he's going to have a really rough go of it, how they do stuff over there. So it's important that the British get involved. When recently they've disparaged what Russia's doing, they've advocated for more human rights, but they really haven't made any actions, and it'll be interesting to see what they do about that. And then another third possible threat in the East that's rising is North Korea. Kim Jong-un is very hostile towards the West, and they're always striving to become more nuclear capable, and they sink so much of their budget into their military that most of their people are starving. So that's definitely, if those three align, that would bring a lot of trouble. So it's important that the US and the UK kind of revert to their kind of tandem nature, which they move in unison, doing what's best for the other person and using their combined economic influence, political influence, and military power together. Because the US, although China's becoming an economic rival, it still has the #1 GDP, and the UK is at 5, so when you combine those two, it definitely brings a lot of strength. And then some takeaways. So the US and the UK, because of their intertwined history and just the way how close they've been for so many years, they have a bond unlike any other two nations in the world. And their friendship has led to so much success in being instrumental in the fall of their previous enemy, the USSR. Countless wars that they've helped each other, they've helped each other succeed in many wars like Korea, Vietnam, the Falklands, the Gulf War, both Afghanistan, Iraq. So both countries are highly influential and bring many powerful allies and advantages to each other. So it's important that they remain aligned and strong with these coming threats rising. So it'll be interesting to see how Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden and whoever their successors may be deal with these coming tensions, especially when it seems that war could be what we're facing in the near future. Any questions? Dismissed.
So this wasn't in your presentation, so it's maybe out of bounds, but I wonder if in your researches you came across anything that gave you any kind of insights into the nature of the relationship between the U.S. and Britain under Donald Trump. Did you see anything about the erosion of the relationship and a relationship that Trump wasn't concerned about or didn't sort of follow the recent traditions of the special relationship?
Well, obviously, like, you gotta mention Brexit. Trump was actually an advocate of Brexit, but so that didn't really play a big role for him. But when it was mostly like him and Theresa May were like mainly dealing with each other, and everything seemed amicable, but definitely was not quite as strong a pairing as either Bush or Blair or Thatcher and Reagan, to where they are kind of like share the same ideologies about a lot of things. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I kind of wonder whether Trump's sort of attitude toward NATO affected the partnership in any way, if you came across anything like that.
I didn't come into anything in regards to NATO, but I know that when I was doing my research that a lot of the UK, as he's a controversial figure here, a lot of the UK citizens also kind of had a little bit of controversy in regards to their views of him. Any other questions?
So I can see how the U.S. is useful for UK foreign policy today. It's not as clear to me how the opposite is true. So in other words, what good is, maybe politically, what good is the UK to us today? Is their military, the economy?
To us today, I mean, military, economy, kind of all of it. Like, they're not as strong as us, but they're definitely among like the top nations that you would want to be your allies. Like, especially in Europe, it's probably them and Germany are two most powerful, and both of which are our allies. But the U.S. and the UK like have just been able to accomplish so much together, and it's proven a successful pairing that I think they should kind of return to that level of closeness in order to face down these new conflicts.
Over the course of time, do you think there's an imbalance, or is there a possibly problematic imbalance between the number of times that the UK comes to our United States aid versus the United States comes to their aid?
I don't think so, because like a lot of times it's been kind of a shared enemy. Like, both were definitely worried about communism. There was a lot of ramping up weapons-wise in Europe that we aided the UK in order to kind of like the arms race versus the USSR. The USSR was also our number one threat. So like a lot of times like we'll give them aid in the Falklands, kind of a more personal conflict, but most of the time when we're acting together, it's been against a shared enemy, or it's been a coalition of nations together kind of under the two's leadership.
Okay, thank you so much, Nate. Appreciate it.